It started with the strange email I received. It was some kind of job listing. It promised a straightforward pay, just logging and moving freight. It sounded good and was something I had experience in, so it seemed like an ideal match for the kind of work I needed. I'd been recently laid off from my previous warehouse job, and the hours at the part-time gig I picked up afterward were abysmal. So when the peculiar offer came from a company called PT Shipping and Logistics, a name I'd never come across before, I didn't hesitate. The opportunity to get back to good-paying work was too appealing to pass up. I applied and didn't expect much to happen right away. But later that same afternoon, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. The subject line read, PT warehouse position, and my heart skipped a beat as I looked. The message was brief yet promising. They wanted to discuss the role further. The salary mentioned nearly made my jaw drop. It was nearly 3 times what I was making at my previous job. It felt almost unreal, but I tempered some of my initial excitement when I considered there must be some catch. Still, I decided to go in for the interview and learn more about the details behind such an enticing offer. The address led me to an industrial park on the edge of town. I pulled up to a nondescript gray building with only a small placard reading PT by the entrance. No windows, just concrete walls and a loading dock around the back. The parking lot was nearly empty, just 3 other cars, despite it being the middle of a workday. I arrived about 15 minutes early for my interview. As I approached the entrance, an odd feeling of dizziness struck me. Something in the air, maybe. I hoped there were no fumes or anything leaking out somewhere. I looked back to the door and it buzzed open before I could even reach for the handle. "You must be the new applicant," a voice called from inside. A tall, thin man in a gray jumpsuit stood just beyond the threshold. "Right on time. We appreciate punctuality." I introduced myself properly and extended my hand, but he simply turned and gestured for me to follow. The interior was nothing like I expected. Instead of the bustling warehouse I'd imagined, the space was eerily quiet. A few fluorescent lights flickered overhead, illuminating rows of shipping containers and large wooden crates. No moving forklifts, no workers, just silence. Where is everyone?" I asked, my voice echoing slightly. "Shift change," the man replied without turning around. "You'll be working nights. Few, distractions that way." We reached a small office at the end of a long corridor. Inside sat an older man behind a metal desk, his graying hair cropped short, his posture rigid even while seated. The nameplate on his desk read, PT Supervisor, Matt Branson. "This the new guy?" he asked, not bothering to look up from his paperwork. "Yes, sir, for the night shift position," the thin man replied, before disappearing back down the hallway, leaving me alone with the man who I presumed would be my boss. "Sit," Matt said, finally glancing up. His eyes were hard, calculating, like he was assessing a piece of equipment rather than a person. I sat in the chair opposite him. I started to introduce myself. Thank you for the opportunity. My name..." But he cut me off. "I know your name and I know you're thankful for the job. Here's how this works. I'm going to get right to the point. Lay out what is expected, and that will be your chance to either take it or leave it." I was surprised by the bluntness of my apparent interview, but I nodded my head and he continued. "You show up at 10 p.m. sharp. You load what needs loading. You unload what needs unloading. You don't ask questions about the cargo. You don't open anything. Ever." I hesitated, flustered by his tone. "Okay, but what exactly will I be?" he interrupted again. "Handling specialized merchandise for high-end clients. That's all you need to know." The pay is good because discretion is mandatory. Got it? Sure thing, boss man, I replied with a slight smirk, trying to mask my unease. His expression didn't change. This isn't a joke, new guy. Break protocol and there will be consequences. Understood? I nodded, swallowing hard. The smirk faded from my face. Crystal clear. Good. I will assume that is a yes then. Welcome aboard. Matt slid a form across the desk. Sign here, please. The rest of the paperwork can wait for later. You start tonight. I scanned the document quickly. It was an unusually lengthy confidentiality agreement. My pen hovered above the signature line as a voice in my head screamed that something wasn't right. The whole "don't ask questions about what we were shipping" screamed of something illegal. But then I thought about my empty bank account, my overdue rent, and I signed. Welcome to PT, Matt said without enthusiasm. He stood up and gestured for me to follow him. I'll give you a quick tour. The warehouse was larger than appeared from outside, the zones marked by colored tape on the concrete floor. Matt pointed to different areas with minimal explanation. Inbound, outbound, staging, processing. Each section contained identical black shipping containers with no markings except for small barcodes. What's in those? I asked, gesturing to a row of containers. Matt's eyes narrowed and I realized my mistake. Right, sorry, I mumbled, apologetically. They really did take the confidentiality of the cargo seriously. As we walked towards the back, I noticed a large metal door with a keypad lock. Unlike the rest of the facility, this door had warning signs. Authorized personnel only, and environmental controls in effect. And that area? I couldn't help asking. Matt paused, as if assessing what he should say. Storage, Matt said flatly. He squared his shoulders and turned to face me directly, his weathered face suddenly severe in the harsh fluorescent light. Listen closely, because I'm only going to say this once. There are a few strict rules here at PT. Not guidelines, not suggestions, rules. Break them and you're gone. No warnings. No second chances. I nodded, suddenly aware of how quiet the massive warehouse was. I still thought it was odd that no one else was around. Rule number 1. Matt raised a finger. Never, under any circumstances, open any of the boxes or shipping containers. I don't care if you hear noises coming from inside. I don't care if one starts leaking something. I don't care if the manifest says it contains gold bullion and the lock falls off in your hand. You do not open anything. If anything is already open, you call me immediately. His eyes held mine, searching for any hint of defiance or misunderstanding. I nodded again, feeling a cold knot forming in my stomach. Rule number 2, he continued, raising another finger. All freight processing must be completed on schedule every night. The manifests will be on your workstation, and everything listed must be moved, sorted, and prepared before end of shift. No exceptions. A muscle in his jaw twitched. If the work falls behind, breaks and lunches will be skipped. I've worked double shifts before, and I can assure you it's not pleasant. He walked a few paces, gesturing for me to follow. We passed a row of strange equipment I couldn't identify, machines with dials and gauges that looked medical in nature rather than industrial. Rule number 3. Maintain complete radio silence unless absolutely necessary. The equipment we use is sensitive to certain frequencies. Use the intercom system only if you urgently need to communicate with another worker. I glanced around, noticing for the first time the small black intercom boxes mounted at intervals along the walls. Rule number 4, Matt continued, his voice dropping slightly. Some of the areas of the warehouse are temperature controlled. The thermostats are preset. Do not adjust them for any reason, even if it feels unbearably cold or hot. The merchandise requires specific conditions. When I say cold, I mean cold. You might want to make sure you have a jacket or something warm. You're going to need it. We reached a small metal door with a biometric scanner inside. Matt placed his palm on the scanner, and a green light flashed. Rule number 5, he said, his tone becoming even more serious, if that was possible. At exactly 5 a.m., an alarm will sound. When you hear it, no matter what you're doing, no matter how urgent the task seems, you will immediately proceed outside through the emergency exit doors. Everyone must exit the building during this time. It's the only mandatory break of your shift, and it lasts precisely 15 minutes. Not 14, not 16. What's that about? I asked before I could stop myself. Matt's expression darkened. That's the company performing system checks. Nothing for you to worry about. He stepped closer, his weathered face just inches from mine. But understand this. If you're still inside after that alarm, I can't guarantee your safety. The way he said it sent ice through my veins. Not a threat, but a genuine warning. Whatever it was, must be legitimately dangerous. I tried to ignore the sinking feeling I was getting and nodded my head. Got it, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Outside at 5 a.m. Matt nodded, seemingly satisfied with my response, and he continued. Rule 6 concerns dealing with strangers or intruders on the premises. Should you detect anyone lingering here without proper authorization, you are to detain them if possible. If not, contact me immediately so I can alert our security lead. I know you might have reservations, so let me dispel them now. We are not engaging in any illegal activities here. Despite the peculiar hours and need for discretion, PT Shipping operates as a legitimate business. We own this building outright and possess all necessary business licenses. Our discretion protects our clientele, and Mr. Jaspin's work demands it, as does ours. As such, this is private property. Trespassing is strictly forbidden. Is that clear? I nodded briskly, suppressing the torrent of questions swirling in my mind, realizing it was unwise to voice them under his intense glare. He interpreted my silence as understanding and continued. Good. That is it. Keep to your job, don't ask questions, and get paid well. Now for your workstation. He led me to a small desk tucked between tall shelving units. A computer terminal, clipboard, and handheld scanner sat waiting. Next to them was a gray uniform with PT embroidered on the breast pocket. You'll work alone most nights, Matt explained. Occasionally there's another handler on shift, but don't count on the company. Handler? I repeated. Is that my job title? Matt's jaw tightened. Product handler. That's what you are. He checked his watch. I've got to go. Your first shift starts at 10 p.m. Don't be late. As he turned to leave, I noticed something strange. A dark stain on the concrete floor near one of the shipping containers. It looked like someone had tried to clean it up, but hadn't quite managed to remove it completely. One more thing, Matt called over his shoulder. Stay away from the containers marked with red tags. Those are priority shipments to Mr. Jaspin himself. I will handle those, and if I'm unavailable, leave them unless absolutely necessary to get them out on time. With that, he disappeared through a side door, leaving me alone in the cavernous space. The silence was absolute now, broken only by the distant hum of what sounded like industrial refrigeration units. I picked up the gray uniform and examined it. Standard work clothes, but the material felt oddly stiff, almost like it had been starched beyond reason. My shift didn't start for hours, so I decided to head back home and force myself to get some sleep. It was going to be a long first night, and I had to get used to becoming a night owl. I did not sleep much and got back to work a few minutes before 10 p.m. The place was unnerving at night. The outside was barely lit, and I almost tripped several times just walking from the parking lot to the main building. I stepped in and saw that at least it was brighter inside. I made it to my station and saw a new inventory log, and as I was reading it, I nearly dropped it to the ground when someone tapped me on the shoulder and startled me. I spun around and saw a woman, mid-40s maybe, with prematurely gray hair pulled back in a severe bun that looked painfully tight. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes, and she regarded me with a clinical detachment that made me feel like a specimen under glass. "You must be the new guy," she said flatly with no introduction. She wore a dark jumpsuit and heavy steel-toed boots that looked like they could crush concrete. Yeah, that's me," I replied, trying to calm my racing pulse. "And you are?" She sighed, as if my simple question had already exhausted her patience. "Jean, inventory lead." She glanced at my uniform, which I'd changed into before arriving. "At least you dressed properly. The last guy showed up in sneakers. Didn't last a week." The way she said it made me wonder what had happened to him, but I decided not to ask. "Matt gave you the rules?" She didn't wait for my confirmation before continuing. "Good. Follow them to the letter. I've been here 7 years. There's a reason for that." Jean moved with an efficiency of motion that spoke of someone who never wasted energy. She pulled a tablet from a nearby shelf and tapped the screen a few times. "First truck is due soon," she said, checking her watch. "Your job is to help me unload, check the manifests, and get everything sorted according to protocol." She handed me the tablet. "Tonight's a quiet one. Only 3 shipments. Not much to load up either. Pay attention, because you will be doing a lot of this by yourself in the near future, and also because I don't like repeating myself." I nodded my head and examined the manifest. Most entries were coded with alphanumeric sequences that meant nothing to me, but the quantities and timestamps were clear enough. What are we shipping exactly?" The question slipped out before I could stop myself. Jean's eyes flicked to mine, then away. She sighed again, deeper this time. "What did Matt tell you about questions?" "Right. Sorry." "Look," she said, her voice dropping slightly. "I get it. You're new. You're curious. Natural human response." She leans closer. "But trust me when I say curiosity is actively discouraged here. Not just by management." Something in her tone sent a chill down my spine. Before I could respond, a buzzer sounded, indicating a truck had arrived at the loading dock. "That's our cue," Jean said, straightening up. "Follow me. Do exactly as I do. Nothing more, nothing less." We walked to the loading dock where a large black semi had backed up to the platform. Unlike any delivery truck I'd seen before, this one had no company logo, no DOT numbers, nothing to identify it. Just pure matte black. Even the license plates. The driver remained in the cab, engine idling. Jean approached the back of the truck and entered a code on the keypad. The rear doors swung open silently, revealing a cargo area that seemed impossibly dark despite the loading dock's harsh lights. "Stand back," Jean instructed, positioning herself to the side of the opening. I did as told, watching as she pressed another button on the wall. A mechanical whirring filled the air, and a platform extended from the dock into the truck's interior. What happened next defied explanation. The darkness inside the truck seemed to ripple, like heat waves rising from asphalt on a scorching day. Then, as if pushed by invisible hands, 3 large containers slid out onto the platform. They weren't standard shipping crates. These were sleek black boxes about 7 feet long and 3 feet wide, with no visible handles or seams. Each bore only a barcode and a small digital display showing a temperature reading. 2 displayed a normal room temperature, but the third read a negative 15 degrees Celsius. "That one goes to cold storage immediately," Jean said, pointing to the frigid container. "I'll handle it. You log the other two. As she maneuvered the cold container onto a special cart, I approached the remaining boxes with the scanner in hand. The moment I got close, I felt a terrible ringing in my ears. Then an odd sort of buzzing, like a bee has flown down into my inner ear. I could have sworn I heard a faint scratching sound as well. I froze, scanner hovering in midair. Problem? Jean called from several feet away, her voice sharp. I thought I heard. She was already frowning at me. Nothing, I quickly stated, shaking my head. Just getting used to the scanner. Jean's eyes narrowed slightly, lingering on me a moment too long. Scan them and move on. We're on a schedule. I ran the scanner over the barcodes, trying to ignore the odd buzzing near the box. The scanner beeps confirmation, and the tablet in my other hand automatically updated with the shipment details. Now what? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Now we move them to staging, Jean said, returning from cold storage. Zone B for these. Follow me. I helped her push the cart with the 2 remaining containers through the warehouse. The wheels squeaked slightly on the concrete floor, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. As we rolled them into place, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not the only ones there. Listen, Jean said abruptly, after we'd positioned the containers. She sighed, rubbing her temple with 2 fingers. I don't usually bother with new people. Most don't last. But you seem... She paused, searching for the right word. Less stupid than some. So I'm going to give you some advice. She looked around, ensuring we were truly alone. When the 5 a.m. alarm sounds, be the first one out the door. Don't dawdle. Don't finish just one more thing. And whatever you do, don't look back at the building. I swallowed hard. Oh, why not? Because some things can't be unseen, she said flatly. And because I've outlasted 3 full crews by minding my own business and following protocol to the letter. You are here now. The pay is good. If you don't ask questions or get any ideas, you will be fine. Everyone else that has been let go has done something stupid. Keep your head down and your mouth shut, for your sake and everyone else's. The buzzing sounds grew slightly louder. Jean didn't seem to notice, or was pretending not to. What's actually in these? I whispered, nodding toward the container. Jean's face hardened. You really don't listen, do you? But something in her expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. She leaned in closer. The Proud Tailor deals in specialized merchandise. That's all you need to know. The Proud Tailor? I thought this was PT shipping in. She cut me off. PT, the initials. She tapped her temple with one finger. Figure it out. Mr. Jaspin expects his shipments to arrive in perfect condition. Our job is to ensure that happens. Nothing more. Before I could ask who Mr. Jaspin was, the intercom cackled to life.
Jean, report to receiving. The second shipment is arriving early.
It was Matt's voice, sounding groggy but no less irritable. Jean straightened immediately. Got it. She turned to me. Finish logging these 2, then meet me at the receiving dock. Don't touch anything else. With that, she strode away, her boots making barely any sound on the concrete floor. I glanced at the manifest on the tablet. The description field for these containers simply read, Display units, fragile, temp sensitive. My hand hovered over the container's surface. No locks were visible, just a seam around the middle where it presumably opened. The rules were clear. Never open anything. Yet the curiosity in that moment was overwhelming. I started to get morbid ideas. What if this was some kind of human trafficking operation? The silhouette of the boxes was ghoulish. As I stared down at the box, my mind raced with more possibilities. and the desire to know grew stronger. Suddenly, the intercom crackled, breaking my morbid musings.
New guy, where are you? Second shipment's waiting.
Matt's voice echoed through the warehouse, impatience evident. I quickly tapped a response into the container manifest, marking it as processed, and hurried toward receiving. Whatever was happening here, whatever was in those boxes, I needed more information before I did anything stupid. Jean's warning echoed in my mind. Curiosity was actively discouraged. Now I understood why. I arrived at the loading dock just as the next truck rumbled its way into the bay. This one appeared more typical than the first, its worn exterior a familiar sight. Most of the freight was neatly packed into the standard-style shipping containers, their metal sides marked with destination labels and handling instructions. The sight of these ordinary items eased the tension I felt earlier. Jean quickly scanned through the manifest, her eyes darting from line to line. Meanwhile, I maneuvered our small yellow forklift to offload the unassuming cargo. It was a few more hours of moving boxes, and almost everything had been stowed away and logged properly. I was just finishing another trip when I heard a loud alarm sound. I noticed it was nearly 5 a.m., and I almost tripped over myself to run out of there. The loading bay lights pulsed in sync with the blaring siren, each flash amplifying the urgency in the air. I reached the door, breathless, just as Jean appeared at my side. Her pace was brisk, purposeful, as she kept her eyes locked on the exit, not sparing a single glance behind. We both pushed through the emergency exit door into the pre-dawn darkness. The cool morning air was nice, clearing the warehouse fog from my mind. Jean kept walking until she reached the edge of the parking lot, where she stopped and lit a cigarette with practiced motions. I followed, watching as a few other workers I hadn't seen during my shift emerged from different exits around the building. None of them looked at each other, or at the building. All of them kept their eyes fixed on the ground, or on distant points in the darkness. "You did good," Jean said as I approached, exhaling a cloud of smoke that hung in the still air. "Most newbies have to be reminded about the 5 a.m. drill." "What's really happening in there?" I whispered, unable to help myself despite all the warnings. Jean took another long drag and sighed heavily. "System maintenance," she said flatly, but there was something in her tone that suggested she didn't believe her own words. "That's bullshit, and you know it," I whispered, making sure none of the other workers could hear us. She turned to me, her eyes hard in the dim light of the parking lot lamps. "Listen carefully. There are things that happen in this job that defy explanation. I've learned it's better for my sanity, safety, and continued employment to accept the official answers." A strange sound cut through the pre-dawn stillness, something between a mechanical whine and a muffled scream. It seemed to come from inside the building, but it was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. Organic yet mechanical. Pained yet precise. I instinctively turned toward the sound. Jean's hand shot out, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "Don't," she hissed, her fingers digging into my flesh. "Don't go back. Don't even look back at the building during maintenance." I forced my gaze away, focusing instead on the cigarette between Jean's fingers. The ember glowed orange in the darkness, hypnotic in its simplicity. "How long have you worked here?" I asked, trying to distract myself from the sounds that continued to emanate from the building. Sounds that seemed to be growing in intensity. 7 years, 2 months, 16 days, she replied without hesitation. "Longest anyone's lasted besides Matt." "Who is Mr. Jaspin? You mentioned him earlier." Jean's expression flickered with something that might have been fear. "The owner of the Proud Tailor. He visits occasionally to inspect special shipments." She took a final drag of her cigarette before crushing it under her boot. If you ever see a tall, thin man in an expensive suit, stay out of his way. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact unless he initiates it. He likes to chat. And if he likes chatting with you, well, you might get the wrong kind of attention." I considered what she said and wondered why someone who owned a tailoring store would need a shipping operation like this. For a second, I laughed at the idea of the secret things in the boxes being knocked off jeans or other cheap clothes that we were moving just to avoid customs and state taxes. Whatever was in those black boxes, though, sure didn't feel like clothes. Another sound pierced the air. This one a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. Several of the other workers winced visibly, clutching their ears. One man standing close to the door suddenly fell to his knees, his face contorted in a silent scream. Then, as suddenly as it began, the sound stopped. A heavy silence fell over the parking lot, broken only by the distant call of an early bird and someone's ragged breathing. "1 minute left," Jean announced, checking her watch. "Everyone remember where you were working. We aren't done yet." I stared at her, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "Jean, what the hell is going on in there? Those sounds, they weren't machinery." She didn't answer, her eyes fixed on her watch. The other workers had formed a loose line near the doors, like actors waiting for their cue to return to stage. 30 seconds, Jean called out. I grabbed her arm. "I can't go back in there without knowing what—" 10 seconds, she interrupted, shaking off my grip and hissing back at me. "Get in line or they will notice." The implication was clear. I hurried to join the others just as a different alarm sounded. 3 short beeps that seemed to signal the all clear. The workers filed back inside through the same doors they'd exited, their movements mechanical, rehearsed. Jean waited for me at the entrance. "Back to your station," she instructed. "Act normal. Whatever you think you heard, forget it." I followed her inside, fighting every instinct that screamed for me to run. The warehouse appeared exactly as we'd left it. Containers neatly arranged, equipment powered down, paperwork stacked on desks. But something had changed. The air felt heavier somehow, charged with an energy that made the hair on my arms stand on end. As I walked back to my station, I noticed something on the floor that hadn't been there before. A fine white powder, almost like plaster dust, trailing from the door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" to the loading dock. And near one of the containers we'd processed earlier, a small dark stain that looked disturbingly like blood. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of activity. We loaded a small outgoing truck, and for some reason Jean had me log the shipment, but would not let me help load the boxes on board. By the time 7 a.m. rolled around, we were done and our replacements had arrived. 2 stone-faced men who acknowledged us with nothing more than curt nods. I followed Jean to the employee break room, where she retrieved a worn leather bag from her locker. "First night's always the hardest," she said, not unkindly. "You did okay." "Jean," I said, lowering my voice even though we were alone. "I can't keep working here without some answers. Those containers and those sounds during the maintenance. Something is seriously wrong with all this, isn't there?" "Stop," she cut me off sharply. "Just stop right there." Jean's eyes darted to the security camera in the corner of the locker room. She grabbed my arm with surprising strength and pulled me closer. "Not here," she whispered, her breath hot against my ear. "Meet me at Denny's on Highway 16. 1 hour. With that, she shouldered her bag and walked out, leaving me standing alone in the sterile locker room. I stared at my reflection in the small mirror above the sink. Pale face, dark circles forming under my eyes. A haunted look I didn't recognize. Just what the hell had I gotten myself into? The drive to Denny's gave me time to think. Maybe too much time. Every scenario my mind conjured was worse than the last. Drug smuggling, organ harvesting, human trafficking. None of them quite fit what I suspected I saw, or at least thought I saw. Based on the hints and unnerving glimpses, I really did not know anything for sure about what was really going on at PT Shipping. Yet anything seemed plausible. Jean was already there when I arrived, tucked into a booth in the far corner, nursing a cup of coffee. She changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a faded sweatshirt, but the severe bun remained, pulling her features taut. "You came," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "Wasn't sure you would." "Of course. What was it you wanted to tell me?" I was sort of hoping that it might be a bit more about what the hell we were moving in that place, I replied, keeping my voice low despite the nearly empty restaurant. "What I heard last night. What I saw." "You didn't see anything," Jean interrupted, her eyes hard. "That's the first thing you need to understand. If you're going to survive this job, you need to accept that some things cannot be explained. Or rather, should not be explained." A waitress approached, but Jean waved her away with a practiced gesture. The woman retreated without a word, as if she recognized something in Jean that warned against interruption. I can't just pretend I didn't hear anything. I mean, come on, are we even safe? I asked, leaning forward. Something is wrong with those containers. Something was buzzing, maybe even scratching inside them. Then there were the screams during that so-called maintenance period. Jean's hands shot across the table, gripping my wrist with painful intensity. Her fingernails dug into my skin as she pulled me closer. "Lower your voice," she hissed. Her eyes, I noticed for the first time, weren't just tired. They held a kind of haunted knowledge that made me falter. Yes, there were sounds. Yes, there were things in those containers that probably don't fit into your neat little understanding of the world. But knowing more won't help you. It will only make things worse. And no, strictly speaking, we are not what you would probably call safe. But the only way to guarantee you are not safe is to keep openly asking questions. She released my wrist, leaving small crescent marks where her nails had been. I rubbed the spot, watching as she took another sip of her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. I can't keep working there. Whatever's happening, it's messed up. At this point, the whole thing seems like it's a front for something massively illegal. I don't know how much you aren't telling me. Maybe we could go to the police. With everything we suspect, someone would have to investigate. A harsh, bitter laugh escaped Jean's lips, drawing glances from the few other early morning patrons. She leaned back in the booth, suddenly looking almost defeated. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The police, they already know, or at least certain people in the department do. Why do you think we operate so openly? Why do we have business licenses and tax ID numbers? This isn't some fly-by-night operation. PT has connections." "What kind of connections could possibly allow them to—" "Powerful ones," Jean cut me off. "Look, I've seen people like you before. Decent, moral people who think they can change things. Who think they can expose what's happening and make it stop." She leaned forward again, her eyes locking with mine. "Remember Jacob? The guy who had your job before you?" I shook my head. "Exactly. No one remembers Jacob. He decided to be a hero too. Took photos on his phone of one of the containers. Tried to open one when no one was looking." Her voice caught slightly. 2 days later, his apartment was empty. All his things were gone. Like he never existed. His mother filed a missing persons report. Nothing came of it. A cold weight settled in my stomach. You're saying they killed him? Jean's eyes darted around the restaurant before returning to mine. I'm saying he disappeared. Just like Marissa before him, and David before her. People who ask too many questions don't last long at PT. I swallowed hard and considered her words. It was too much at that point, and I just resolved to get out. I told Jean my plan. Okay then, I will just quit. I don't like it, but if something dangerous or illegal is going on that could just disappear me, then I will just leave. I can even put in a 2 weeks' notice, so they don't think it is because I suspect something. Jean laughed, a harsh and hollow sound. She looked at me like I was an unruly child. You think that they believe anyone could be so dense as to not suspect something? Even after one night. So then what can I do? Why are you telling me this? Her eyes narrowed and she responded. Because you need to know that you can't just quit now. You are in this whether you like it or not. If you want to not disappear too, then just keep your head down, keep quiet, and do not rock the boat. The less you know, the less danger you're in. I have to go. You should get some sleep and remember what I told you. I'm off tomorrow. Try and keep safe while I'm gone, and take care. She threw some money on the table and walked out without another word, and I was left stunned and speechless. It sounded like I was stuck, and I still had no idea what I had gotten myself into. My anxiety was palpable, and I hardly got any sleep when I returned home. If what Jean said was true, then the place I had just gotten a job at was hiding a dark secret, and I could not uncover it or leave and run away. I was forced, for the time being, to continue working for the bizarre company, continue shifting those mysterious boxes without ever knowing what horrors they might contain. When it was time to go back, I hesitated and almost considered calling out and not going. But I didn't want to attract any unwanted attention just then. So I summoned my courage and went back to PT shipping for my second day of work. I arrived a few minutes early, but no one else was there to greet me this time. I shuffled in and grabbed a new manifest from my workstation and the tablet. I saw the first shipment was scheduled to arrive in the next 10 minutes. Then I looked at the list, continue on into another page, and realized that there were twice the amount of trucks that day than my first, and I had no apparent help. At least with what I would be doing. I thought briefly about the other people I saw leave the building yesterday at 5 a.m. Why did they have us sectioned off and not working together? It was another question I would have to set aside. I was going to be very busy and thought that maybe the distraction might be nice. The first truck backed up to the loading dock with a low rumble that vibrated through the concrete floor. I approached, cautiously, remembering Jean's methodical movements from the night before. The keypad by the door blinked expectantly. I punched in the code I'd memorized and stepped back as the door swung open. Unlike last night's mysterious black containers, this truck held rows of ordinary-looking wooden crates. They were stacked neatly, secured with straps, each bearing standard shipping labels and barcodes. No strange temperatures, no odd buzzing, just regular freight. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Maybe not every shipment contained whatever horrors Jean had alluded to. Maybe some days were just normal. The manifest indicated these were textile supplies for various retail locations across the 3 states. Fabric bolts, perhaps, sewing machines, things a company called the Proud Tailor might legitimately ship. I worked efficiently, scanning each crate and moving it to its designated staging area. The forklift hummed beneath me, comfortingly mundane. For nearly an hour, I allowed myself to believe I was simply working a regular warehouse job, one that happened to pay extraordinarily well for night shifts. I thought I might be able to relax for a moment, but I heard the staticky voice of Matt through the intercom.
New guy. Second shipment is ahead of schedule. It is a priority shipment. Get down to receiving Bay B. Get a move on.
I was not even done with the first load, and now the next one was already coming. I was starting to get stressed out that I was falling behind. I rushed to Bay B, maneuvering the forklift hastily through the narrow aisles. As I rounded the final corner, I caught sight of the back of a sleek, black truck, similar to the first one I'd seen last night. My heart immediately began to race, knowing what might be inside. Just as I approached the loading dock, the forklift sputtered, the engine making a high-pitched whining sound I hadn't heard before. The control panel flickered, lights blinking erratically across the dashboard. I tried to slow down, but the machine lurched forward suddenly, as if pushed by an invisible hand. I yanked the steering wheel to the right, narrowly avoiding a stack of pallets. The forklift shuddered violently beneath me, the hydraulics screaming in protest. Then, without warning, the lift dropped, not smoothly as designed, but in a single catastrophic release. They slammed into the concrete floor with a deafening crash, sparks flying as metal scraped against concrete. I was thrown forward against the safety cage, my chest hitting the steering column hard enough to knock the wind out from my lungs. The forklift continued its chaotic movement, spinning in a half circle before the engine cut out completely, leaving me stranded in the middle of the bay.
What the hell are you doing?
Matt's voice boomed from somewhere behind me. I turned to see him storming across the warehouse floor, his face contorted with rage.
I didn't. The forklift just...
I stammered, still trying to catch my breath. Matt reached me in seconds, his weathered face inches from mine.
Get off. Now.
I scrambled down from the malfunctioning vehicle, my legs shaking. Matt circled the forklift, examining it with narrowed eyes. He ran his hand along the control panel, then knelt to inspect the dropped forks.
This equipment was checked yesterday,
he muttered, more to himself than to me. Then his gaze snapped back to my face, eyes cold and calculating.
Goddamn interference is worse than normal. Were you near any red-tagged containers earlier?
No, I answered truthfully. I've been unloading the one marked textile shipment so far. Matt's jaw tightened as he glanced toward the black truck waiting at the bay.
Well, the timing of this is awful.
He pulled a radio from his belt.
Gene, we need you at Bay B. Equipment failure.
There was no response, just static.
Right. She's off today.
The back doors of the black truck swung open on their own, revealing the now familiar darkness that seemed deeper than it should be. A soft, rhythmic thumping sound emerged from within, like something repeatedly striking the interior wall. Matt cursed under his breath.
Those need to be moved immediately. Temperature sensitive.
He turned to me.
You'll have to move them manually.
Manually? I echoed, my voice cracking. You mean carry them?
The dollies are in the maintenance closet,
Matt growled, pointing toward a narrow door across the warehouse.
Grab one. Quick.
I jogged to the closet, my mind racing. Manual handling meant direct contact with whatever those black containers held. The thought made my skin crawl, but I had little choice. Matt was watching my every move with increasing impatience. Inside the closet, I found several heavy-duty dollies designed for oversized freight. I selected the sturdiest-looking one and wheeled it back to the bay where Matt stood, arms crossed, foot tapping rhythmically against the concrete.
Remember the protocol,
he said as I approached the truck.
No unnecessary contact. Move them directly to the designated area.
He glanced at his watch.
I need to make a call. Get this done before I return.
As Matt disappeared through a side door, I faced the yawning darkness of the truck's interior alone. The thumping had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that somehow felt worse. I steeled myself and rolled the dolly up the loading ramp. The first container slid forward, as if pushed by unseen hands, just like the night before. Up close, without Jean's calming presence, the experience was infinitely more unsettling. The black surface seemed to absorb the light around it, and as I positioned the dolly beneath one end, I could have sworn the container shifted slightly, adjusting on its own to maintain balance. I carefully tipped the container back, distributing its considerable weight across the dolly's frame. It was heavier than I expected, at least 300 pounds. As I began to pull it down the ramp, a vibration traveled up through the handles into my arms, a subtle, rhythmic tremor-like heartbeat. The container slid off the truck with surprising ease, almost eager to be free of its confined space. I guided it across the warehouse floor toward the staging area Matt had indicated. With each step, the vibration grew more pronounced. When I reached the staging area, I carefully lowered the container to the ground. As it settled onto the concrete, a sound emerged from within, a kind of soft scraping, like fingernails dragging across the interior surface. I jumped back, nearly losing my grip on the dolly. The digital display on the container flickered, the temperature reading jumping from -10 degrees Celsius to -8, then back again. The scraping sound intensified for a moment, then abruptly stopped. I stood frozen, staring at the black box. Whatever it was sounded like it was moving, scraping. The realization sent ice through my veins, but I couldn't afford to panic. There were still 2 more containers to move, and Matt would return soon. Forcing myself back to the truck, I repeated the process with the second container. This one was even heavier, and as I maneuvered it down the ramp, a thin sheen of condensation formed on its surface, immediately turning to frost in the warehouse air. The temperature display read -15 degrees Celsius, colder than the first. As I positioned it next to the other container, both boxes seemed to shudder simultaneously, as if acknowledging each other's presence. The hair on my arms stood on end, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not by security cameras or by Matt, but by whatever was sealed inside these mysterious shipments. I returned for the third and final container, my nerves fraying with each step. This one looked different from the others, slightly larger, with a faint red glow emanating from its temperature display. As I approached, a wave of dizziness washed over me, accompanied by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. The container slid forward, but unlike the others, it moved aggressively, nearly crushing me against the side of the truck. I stumbled backward, barely catching myself on the loading dock edge. "Careful," Matt said as he walked up behind me. He looked over my shoulder and saw the red glint of the item. "Not sure why this one was not red-tagged on the list. Step out, please. I am taking this to the secure storage room. I need you to move all the other boxes to cold storage and hurry. I don't have anyone else to spare for help at the moment, so just go as fast as you can." I nodded quickly and stepped aside, watching as Matt carefully maneuvered the red-labeled container onto a specialized cart. His movements were precise, almost reverent, as he secured it with straps I hadn't seen used on any other shipment. The container emitted a soft humming noise that made my teeth ache. "Don't fall behind," Matt called over his shoulder as he wheeled the mysterious box away. "And remember, no unnecessary contact." I returned to my task, moving the remaining containers to cold storage with mechanical efficiency. Each one seemed to react differently to being handled. One vibrated intensely when passing certain areas of the warehouse. Another grew noticeably heavier near the loading bay doors, as if reluctant to be stored away. I tried to focus solely on the physical labor, to shut down the part of my brain screaming that none of this was normal. The cold storage area was a maze of shelving units filled with identical black containers. The temperature was brutal, my breath clouding instantly in the frigid air. My fingers grew numb as I positioned each new arrival in its designated spot, guided only by the blinking scanner in my hand. I noticed that some of the older containers had frost patterns forming on their surfaces. Not random crystallization, but intricate, almost deliberate designs. Just as I finished securing the last container, the lights in the cold storage flickered. Once, twice, then plunged into darkness for a full 3 seconds before sputtering back to life. I stood there shivering and regretted not bringing a coat or something warm. Fortunately, I was finished. Back on the main floor, I discovered that 2 more trucks had arrived while I'd been occupied in the cold storage area. My heart sank at the sight of the endless freight waiting to be processed. Without the forklift, I'd have to move everything by hand. Matt was nowhere to be found, likely still dealing with that mysterious red-tagged container. I grabbed another dolly and set to work, my muscles already protesting from the strain of moving the first batch of containers. These new shipments weren't the black boxes, but were still unnervingly heavy crates of textile equipment, according to their manifests, though they weighed far more than any sewing machine I'd ever encountered. I tried to maintain a rhythm as I wheeled crate after crate to their designated areas. The warehouse seemed to stretch endlessly before me, distances expanding impossibly between loading dock and staging areas. My shirt clung to my back with sweat despite the building's chill. After I finished with the trucks, another arrived with dozens of smaller packages needing scanning and sorting. Fatigue made me clumsy, and I fumbled with the scanner, dropping it twice and cracking the casing on the second fall. The clock on the wall read 2:17 a.m. I'd been working non-stop for hours, yet had barely made a dent in the night's shipments. The manifest on my tablet showed 3 more trucks scheduled before dawn. I felt a spike of panic rise in my chest. There was simply no way I could finish all this alone. I worked non-stop, skipping whatever time I would have taken for a break. I was tired, hungry, and exhausted, and no one else was around to help. I lost track of time, and to my horror, I heard the 5 a.m. alarm go off. I dropped a box I was carrying, and it crashed to the floor. I was scared to look down at it, but when I did, I saw the box had not been opened. I bolted to the exit just in time, feeling the adrenaline surging through my veins as I burst out, immediately catching the anxious stares of a few coworkers from the other sections of the warehouse. Their eyes were wide with concern, clearly worried about the chaos erupting behind me. As I hurried further away, I desperately tried to block out the ominous noises that began to echo, a sinister sound building in the distance. Suddenly, a whisper sliced through the tension, urgently vying for my attention. "Hey, you! Did you see Mike? From Section 4? He was supposed to be right behind me." I shook my head and watched as the blood drained from the man's face. I was about to offer some reassurance when the air was pierced by an intensifying buzzing and screeching sound, a cacophony that made my skin crawl. The others turned away, unwilling to face the impending horror. But the man who had questioned me stood frozen, fear etched on his features. The terrifying sounds from yesterday crescendoed once more, each note now carrying the unmistakable clarity of a person's voice. A desperate cry for help. A scream tore through the air, sharp and chilling, and then everything plunged into an eerie, suffocating silence. I turned away, closing my eyes, and tried to steady my thoughts as I waited. Eventually, someone announced we had just 1 minute before maintenance time ended. We lined up to return to our stations, and I caught sight of the man who had asked about his coworker, shuffling despondently behind me. His face was a mask of hopelessness and despair. We all had a sense that something terrible had happened to his friend, but no one knew what, and no one dared to voice it. I returned to my station, so far behind in my remaining work that I felt hopeless. I toiled on mechanically, my mind a tumult of uncertainty and dread. My shift came and went, stretching nearly to 12 hours, finally ending after 9 a.m. Despite the exhaustion, I couldn't shake the feeling of disbelief over my circumstances. I staggered back to my car and drove home. My second day was over, and I found myself wishing I could just ignore the reality of my situation. I went to sleep and tried to forget it all for the small portion of the day I had left, before I had to go back for my third day. Predictably, I had only gotten a few meager hours of sleep. Even then, my dreams were haunted by the events of the previous shift. They kept replaying in my mind the strange containers, the horrifying sounds during maintenance, and, most disturbing of all, the missing worker no one would acknowledge. As I drove to work, I realized I was gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white. I forced myself to relax, to breathe. Whatever was happening at PT Shipping, I needed to keep my head if I was going to survive it long enough to find a way out. The parking lot was nearly empty when I arrived, just like before. I recognized Jean's beat-up sedan and felt a wave of relief. At least I wouldn't be alone tonight. Inside, the warehouse hummed with its usual eerie quiet. I found Jean at her station, methodically checking manifests on her tablet. "You look like shit," she greeted me without looking up. "Didn't sleep much," I admitted, dropping my voice. "Not after what happened yesterday." Jean's fingers paused over the screen. "What happened yesterday?" "Someone didn't make it out during maintenance," I whispered, stepping closer. "I heard him scream. Everyone heard it, but no one said anything afterward. They just pretended it didn't happen." Jean's expression didn't change, but her shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. She glanced at the security camera in the corner before returning to her tablet. "Accidents happen in warehouses," she said flatly. "People get careless. Don't follow protocol." "That wasn't an accident. Whatever happens during maintenance killed someone." Jean slammed her tablet down and fixed me with a cold stare. "Keep your voice down. You want to be next?" The harshness of her words stopped me cold. We stood in tense silence until Jean sighed, rubbing her temples. "Look," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "You're not wrong. Talking about it won't help you. Won't help anyone. Just do your job and stay alive." "How can you be so calm about this?" I demanded. "People are dying here, Jean. I know you're careful, but what happens if you make a mistake? It could be you next with the one slip-up." "You think I don't know that?" Her voice cracked slightly, the first real emotion I'd seen from her. "I've been here 7 years. I've seen things that..." She stopped herself, composing her features back into their usual mask of indifference. "We don't have time for more of this tonight. We have a lot of shipments coming in. Get your head in the game, or get out, and see how far you can get by running away. I thought you were smarter than this. Don't prove me wrong. Now come on. First truck's here." She turned around and walked toward receiving. I followed her, my mind racing with more questions. At first, I didn't want to let it go. I wanted to demand real answers about what was happening. But as I followed her, I started to relent and knew she was right. I couldn't do anything about what happened right now. I need to keep my head down and focus on the immediate task if I wanted to make it through another night. The first truck backed slowly into the bay. Jean punched in the access code and stepped back as the doors swung open. This time, instead of mysterious black containers, the truck held rows of large wooden crates. Regular shipment, Jean murmured, almost sounding relieved. Grab the scanner and let's get started. We worked in silence for nearly an hour, moving crate after crate to the appropriate staging areas. Fortunately, the forklift was working again, and it helped make the process go a lot faster. I started to relax slightly, falling into the rhythm of scan, lift, move, repeat. So, I ventured cautiously as we took a brief pause between trucks. How did you end up working here? 7 years is a long time. Jean gave me a sidelong glance, seeming to weigh whether answering was worth the risk. Finally, she sighed. Needed the money, she said simply. My mother was sick, cancer. The treatments were uncovered by her insurance. PT paid better than anywhere else, and they didn't ask questions about my background. She adjusted her gloves, a little ritual I'd noticed she had when thinking about something. By the time she died, I was in too deep. Couldn't just walk away, like you know by now. I'm sorry about your mother, I said quietly. Jean nodded once, acknowledging my sympathy without inviting further discussion. Second truck's due in 5 minutes. I need to check the manifests. As she walked away, I noticed a slight limp in her gait that hadn't been there before. The physical toll of this job was evident, but I wondered about the mental toll as well. How many maintenance sessions had Jean witnessed? How many co-workers had she seen disappear? The intercom crackled to life, startling me from my thoughts.
Jean, report to my office immediately.
Matt's voice sounded strained, almost nervous. Jean froze mid-step, her shoulders tensing visibly. Without a word, she changed direction and headed toward the administrative section of the warehouse. The look she gave me as she passed was impossible to interpret. Perhaps a warning. Perhaps resignation. Left alone, I continued processing the shipment, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease in my gut. 20 minutes passed with no sign of Jean. The second truck arrived and I found myself facing it alone, remembering the protocol Jean had demonstrated. I punched in the code, stepped back, and watched as the doors swung open. The air that was released when the doors opened felt oddly hot and musty. Normally, they were frigid inside. There was a terrible clattering sound from a fan that may have been the cooling unit. I was no HVAC specialist, but it sounded broken. Inside, there were only 2 large black containers. I scanned them and checked the temperatures and was disturbed when I saw that both were reading much warmer than normal. Instead of the usual negative numbers for the cold storage items, they displayed a 9 degrees Celsius and 12 degrees Celsius respectively, far warmer than they should be. Something was wrong. I hesitated, remembering Jean's warning about containers that weren't operating correctly. I wondered if I should call Matt, but I remembered he was already with Jean, and something about their meeting made me uneasy. I decided to follow protocol and move the containers to their designated area, hoping once they got inside it would not be an issue anymore. As I maneuvered the first container onto the dolly, a sharp, acrid smell hit me, chemical and organic at once, like formaldehyde mixed with rotting meat. I pulled my shirt up over my nose. but it did little to block the stench. The container seemed lighter than usual, almost buoyant on the dolly. Halfway to the staging area, the container began to leak. It started as a thin trickle from one corner, a viscous amber fluid that splattered onto the concrete floor with a hiss. Each droplet seemed to vibrate upon impact, spreading outward in perfect concentric circles. The smell intensified, burning my nostrils and making my eyes water. I froze, uncertain what to do. The rules were clear. Never open anything. Don't even touch the containers more than necessary. But something was clearly wrong, and no one else was around to help. The leaking intensified, the amber fluid now streaming from multiple seams in the container. Where it pooled on the floor, the concrete began to discolor. As I watched the containers leak onto the floor in confused concern, something even worse happened. To my horror, one of the containers emitted a grotesque bubbling and gurgling noise, followed by a distinct thud against its interior. The sounds jolted through me. I stared in disbelief until the relentless banging persisted. Something was trapped inside, desperately clawing to escape. I was too shocked to move, to do anything other than listen to the panicked thrashing inside and watch the hideous container convulse and writhe with the efforts of whatever was inside. All the while, more of the putrid liquid splashed onto the warehouse floor. My terrified stupor broke, and I knew I had to do something. At that moment, I was driven by a desperate desire to throw the lid off and try and see whatever, or worse, whoever, was in there trying to get out. Then I remembered the cameras, and the ever-present danger of what happened to anyone who broke the rules. After an agonized moment, the thrashing in the container had abated somewhat, and to my shame, I had made my choice. I left the container on the floor, remembering the intercom boxes around the warehouse. I searched nearby for the closest one and called for help. Matt, and Jean, we've got a serious situation in Bay B. My voice cracked with panic as I yelled into the intercom. No response came. I pressed the button again, harder this time, as if that would somehow force them to answer. Matt! Jean! 2 containers are leaking and one of them has something moving inside. I need help, now! Only static answered me. The thrashing inside the container had quieted to an occasional thud, but the amber fluid continued to pool, spreading across the concrete in a widening circle. The air felt thick with the chemical stench, making each breath a struggle. Suddenly, a new sound emerged from the second container, a high-pitched keening that oscillated between mechanical whine and human wail. The temperature display flickered wildly, jumping between numbers before settling on error and blinking red letters. Screw this, I muttered, turning to run toward Matt's office. I made it 3 steps before the overhead lights suddenly dimmed, then brightened to an intense glare that cast harsh shadows across the warehouse floor. The intercom crackled to life, but instead of Matt's voice, a strange, modulated tone emerged.
Containment breach detected in Sector 3. Containment protocols initiated.
A siren began to wail, different from the 5 a.m. alarm, more urgent. Red emergency lights began to flash throughout the warehouse, painting the dark corners with a hellish glow. Heavy footsteps pounded across the warehouse floor. Matt appeared, flanked by 2 men I'd never seen before. They wore hazmat suits, their faces obscured behind thick plexiglass visors. Matt's expression was thunderous, a vein pulsing in his temple as he surveyed the scene. "Get back!" he shouted at me, gesturing wildly. "Breach! Get to decontamination now!" The two suited men rushed forward with what looked like industrial fire extinguishers. But instead of foam or water, they sprayed a crystalline white substance over the leaking containers and spreading fluid. The chemical reaction was immediate. The amber liquid hardened, turning to a brittle, glass-like substance that cracked and splintered. I tried to call, I began, but Matt cut me off with a savage gesture. Shut up and move, he snarled, grabbing my arm and dragging me away from the scene. I was able to glimpse behind me as we went back to the office, and saw the hazmat men bathing the container in what looked like some type of liquid nitrogen shower. I heard one of them mumble something about putting them back on ice. And then we were back down the hall and away from the mess. I explained to Matt that I thought the truck's cooling unit was broken and somehow the containers warmed up. I knew better than to ask him what the hell that liquid was or about what I heard and what I saw. He listened to my report and nodded grimly. I wasn't sure what to do, I added, trying to keep my voice steady. I followed protocol as best I could. Matt studied me for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable in the harsh office lighting. Finally, he spoke. You did better than most would have, he admitted, grudgingly. At least you didn't try to open them. A chill ran down my spine at his words. Had he somehow known I'd considered it? Matt's jaw shifted in something akin to a smile. Temperature control failure. Happens sometime during transport. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small metal flask. Taking a deep swig, he offered it to me. Drink. It'll help with the exposure. I hesitated, but the burning in my throat from the chemical fumes made the offer tempting. I took the flask and gulped down a mouthful of what turned out to be surprisingly smooth whiskey. Thanks, I said, handing it back. Matt studied me again, something calculating in his gaze. You did well. Take a break and have a breather outside. We still need to sanitize Bay B. You can get back to it when you return. I was thankful to get the impromptu break to clear my head from the things I had just witnessed. I stepped outside just as Jean was returning. She nodded briefly at me in passing and moved on before I could try and speak with her. I figured she must have been busy, but I wanted to tell her about what I saw. I went outside and got in my car, trying to decompress. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the headrest, trying to make sense of what I'd witnessed. The thrashing inside that container, the amber fluid eating through concrete. None of it could be explained by any legitimate shipping operation. The tap on my window nearly made me jump out of my skin. A woman stood beside my car, her face partially obscured by the hood of a dark jacket. When I didn't immediately respond, she tapped again, harder this time, her knuckles rapping impatiently against the glass. I lowered the window a few inches, caution overriding courtesy. Can I help you? In one fluid motion, she pulled a gun from her pocket and aimed it directly at my face. Don't scream. Don't move. Her voice was steady despite the slight tremor in her hand. Get out of the car. You are going to help me get in there and find my brother. The gun trembled slightly in her hands near a very well-detailed dragon tattoo that circled her wrist. Her eyes remained fixed and determined. She couldn't have been more than 30, with dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept in days. Listen, I said, raising my hand slowly. I just started working here. I don't know anything about... Shut up, she hissed. Mike worked here for 3 months. Yesterday he didn't come home. His car's still even in the lot, but no one's seen him. The police said he has not been gone long enough to declare him missing, that sometimes people just leave. But I know my brother. He wouldn't just disappear. He never told me the specifics, but he was terrified of this place. I don't know why he kept coming here for work, but I knew if he didn't come home that something would have happened here. Mike. The name hit me like a physical blow. The missing worker from yesterday's maintenance period. The one who didn't make it out in time. You need to leave, I whispered urgently. This place isn't safe. If they catch you here, I don't care, she interrupted, pressing the gun closer. 3 months ago, Mike started acting strange. Paranoid. He wouldn't talk about his job, but he was terrified of something. Then yesterday, nothing. His roommate said he went to work and never came back. A tear slid down her cheek. Now get out of the car. My mind raced. If I helped her, I'd be breaking a rule. If I refused, she might shoot me. And if she went in there alone, she'd almost certainly disappear. I had no clue what to do, but for the time being I obliged and stepped out of my car. Please, you have to understand. Whatever happened to your brother, I'm sorry, but going in there is suicide. The things I've seen in just 2 days. I don't need your sympathy. I need answers, and you're gonna help me get them. My mind raced through possibilities. We were in the parking lot, presumably visible on security cameras. How long before someone noticed? Before Matt sent someone to check on me? What's your name? I asked, trying to buy time. Lisa, she replied after a moment's hesitation. Mike Donovan is my brother. Lisa, listen to me. There's something wrong with this place. It's not safe. I trailed off, realizing how insane it would sound to describe what I'd witnessed. I don't care. If he is still in there, I'm going to get him. You are going to get me in there. Lisa's voice cracked with desperation. She pressed the gun to my back and I started walking back to the main door. I had no idea what her plan was, but I had to think of something to save both of us. I got back to the door and looked at Lisa, and she nodded. I pressed the button on the door, and as it opened, I saw Jean. She was just stepping outside, a freshly lit cigarette in her lips as she was walking out at the same time. Her eyes flicked from me to Lisa, then zeroed in on the gun with a clinical detachment. Put that down before you get yourself killed, Jean said, her voice flat and emotionless. Lisa's hand trembled, the gun now wavering between Jean and me. Stay back. I just want to find my brother. Mike Donovan. He worked here and now he's gone. Jean's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe even a hint of pity. She took a single step forward. I knew Mike. He was a good guy. Lisa's face crumpled. What do you mean, was? Jean gazed at Lisa with a contradictory mixture of compassion and indifference. Mike violated protocol during maintenance yesterday. There was an incident. Bullshit! Lisa's voice rose dangerously. What does that even mean? Where is he? What are you telling me? She pointed the gun straight at Jean, who stood there looking indifferent to the threat. You are going to take me inside, and we are going to find him. Jean slowly raised her hands as if finally acknowledging the gun pointed at her, and responded emotionlessly. This way. I followed both of them back into the warehouse, nervously looking around to see if anyone was there to help. I knew we were in danger, but I felt conflicted. This woman was just looking for her brother. It sounded like she had some idea of the danger he was in. I wanted her to have answers and closure, but I knew what it meant to break protocol and try and help. If anything, in order to save my own skin, the rules dictated I had to try and detain her for trespassing. I followed along in a conflicted daze. Distracted as I was, I barely registered the flashing light behind us near the fallen tablet that Jean had left. We walked along for a while and everything was strangely quiet. We arrived at a side entrance near the storage rooms. We stopped moving and Lisa looked nervous and asked, "What is this? Why are we stopping?" Jean turned around and flatly stated, "To say I am sorry about this. For you and for Mike." I was confused and Lisa looked concerned. A deafening crash erupted behind us as the warehouse door flew open with a violent force. Before I could even turn around, a mountain of a man charged through, moving with terrifying speed for someone his size. In one fluid motion, he slammed into Lisa, knocking her forward with such force that the gun clattered across the concrete floor. "Target down," the man announced in a cold, methodical voice. Lisa struggled beneath his massive frame, gasping for air as he twisted her arm behind her back with practiced efficiency. I stood frozen, shocked by the sudden ambush. I took a step back and almost put my own hands up. The large man looked up at Jean and then at me, and then growled out a brief introduction. "Charles Stanton, Security Chief. I see the firearm, so I presume you were taken by force and have not failed to detain the target yourselves." His voice had a strange air of accusation, like it was our fault for not arresting the woman who had us at gunpoint and making him do his job. Stanton suddenly yanked Lisa to her feet. His face was a mask of professional detachment, but his eyes, there was something predatory in them that made my blood run cold. "Civilian trespasser," Jean explained, brushing dust from her uniform. "Armed, as you saw. Took us hostage." Stanton nodded his head and looked at me. "Since the trespasser was apprehended, you are free to leave now. Considering the circumstance, I will speak to Matt and authorize you to take the rest of the night off. Go home and get some rest. Leave this to us." I looked at Lisa, who had been handcuffed, and then at Jean, who was grimly watching as Stanton was logging something on his phone. I know he had just held me at gunpoint, but something felt wrong about leaving her with this Stanton guy. I asked what would happen with her. "Local authorities have been contacted," Stanton replied, his voice unnervingly calm. "They'll deal with the trespasser appropriately." Something in his tone didn't match his words. I did not feel like it was standard procedure for handling a trespasser. He was not even making a call, and why did he want me to leave all of a sudden? It was just this mountain of a man with dead eyes claiming authorities had been contacted. "I just want to know what happened to my brother," Lisa shouted, struggling against her restraints. "Please! Mike, are you here?" Stanton's massive hand clamped over her mouth, silencing her instantly. "That's enough," he growled, all pretense of professionalism vanishing. I took a hesitant step forward. "Maybe I should stay. I mean, I was involved, so I should probably give a statement or something." Jean shot me a warning look, almost imperceptible but unmistakable in its intensity. Her eyes said everything her mouth couldn't. "Get out. Now." "Your statement can wait until tomorrow," Stanton said, his attention returning to me. "Go home. That's an order." I looked at Lisa one last time. Tears streamed down her face, her eyes wide with terror and pleading. I wanted to help her, but what could I do? If I stayed, I'd likely disappear too. "Okay," I said finally, backing away. I'll see you tomorrow, Jean." Jean nodded grimly at me and then turned back to Stanton and the captive Lisa. I reluctantly left the warehouse on unsteady legs, my mind reeling with conflicted emotions. The sound of Lisa's desperate cries echoed in my ears as I stumbled to my car. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the keys, dropping them twice before managing to unlock the door. Once inside, I sat motionless, staring at the warehouse's blank exterior. What was happening there right now? What would happen to me if I'd stayed? I felt sick, guilty, and helpless. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, glancing repeatedly in my rearview mirror at the building receding behind me. No police cars approached. No sirens wailed in the distance. Whatever Stanton meant by authorities, it clearly wasn't the local police department. Back home, I felt a creeping sense of paranoia. I double-locked the door behind me and drew all the blinds. I thought I could ignore everything and press on. But more and more happened every day. I did not know how much more I could take, and my heart sank when I realized I had another day of that madness in store for me tomorrow. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lisa's terrified face, heard her desperate pleas for her brother. I kept thinking of the containers, the amber fluid, the thrashing inside. The pieces were starting to fit together in my mind, forming a picture too horrifying to believe. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. 7-Eleven on Westfield. 20 minutes. Come alone. Jay. I hopped out of bed, threw on clothes, and raced to my car, checking over my shoulder every few seconds. The parking lot of the convenience store was nearly empty when I arrived. I spotted Jean's sedan parked at the far end, away from the building's security cameras. She sat behind the wheel, sunglasses on despite the overcast day, her hair down for once instead of in its usual bun. I almost didn't recognize her. "Get in," she said when I approached, not bothering with a greeting. I slid into the passenger seat, noticing her bloodshot eyes and the slight tremor in her hands as she gripped the steering wheel. "What happened to Lisa?" I asked immediately. Jean stared straight ahead through the windshield. "You don't want to know." "I do," I insisted. "Please, just tell me." She turned to face me, removing her sunglasses. The dark circles under her eyes seemed deeper than ever. "She's gone, like her brother. And no, you can't help her. And neither could I." My stomach twisted into knots. "You just let them take her? What the hell are they going to do with her?" "What would you have me do?" Jean snapped, a rare flash of emotion breaking through her stoic facade. "Fight off Stanton? That man has killed people with his bare hands. Unfortunately, I've seen it." She shook her head, running trembling fingers through her hair. "There are two types of people at PT. Those who follow orders and those who disappear." "What are they doing in there, Jean? Those containers, the maintenance period, all of it. What the hell is going on?" Jean was silent for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "The Proud Tailor isn't just a shipping company, and it's definitely not a regular tailor." She turned to look at me, her eyes haunted. "The name is a sick joke. They don't make clothes, or if they do, it's secondary. They make something else." "What?" "I don't know exactly, and I'm only telling you because I trust you're the only one who would believe me, and not tell Matt or anyone else. I saw inside a container. Just once. The lid was ajar. I couldn't help but look. I closed it up before anyone saw, and somehow the security cameras missed my infraction. Because I'm still here and still breathing." I couldn't believe it. Jean had seen what it was we were shipping. I knew she was struggling, but I had to ask all the same. "What did you see?" She hesitated, and then eventually responded. "It was just a brief glimpse. I'm still not completely sure I saw what I saw. But it was enough. Enough to know that we are shipping parts for something. And some of the parts are alive. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications too terrible to fully process. Alive? I whispered. She swallowed hard. Yes. What I saw was alive, I think. 7 years is a long time. I've picked up bits and pieces, overheard things. The proud tailor apparently has facilities all over the country. They ship these parts between locations. Hundreds, maybe thousands of them. When they are done doing whatever they do with them, they move them to red boxes. I think it is whatever the final product is. That's insane, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they rang hollow. The containers, the maintenance period, the screams, it all pointed to something unimaginable. The containers that leaked yesterday, I began, remembering the amber fluid eating through concrete. Something was moving inside, thrashing. Jean nodded grimly. Temperature control is crucial. When they warm up, you start to hear things. She trailed off, shaking her head. That's why cold storage is so important. Keeps whatever's inside dormant. We need to go to the police or FBI or something, I said, reaching for my phone. Jean's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. And tell them what? I can't prove anything. I still don't fully trust my own eyes on what I saw. Never mind the fact that I told you about PT's connections. You mean the police and that guy Stanton, I muttered, remembering the mountain of a man who'd appeared so quickly. Jean nodded. Ex-military. Now he's security for PT. But that barely scratches the surface of what he does. He has friends in the police department, in City Hall. If you went to the authorities, they'd either laugh you out of the building, or... She left the rest unsaid. So what, we just keep working there? Keep moving those things? I felt sick at the thought. Keep watching people disappear during maintenance? Jean stared at her hands. I've survived this long by following the rules. By not asking questions. By looking the other way. I'm not proud of it, but it's kept me alive. There has to be something we can do. Some way to expose what's happening. You don't understand. The proud tailor has clients. Powerful people whose names show up on delivery lists. If you knew some of the names, you might understand how hopeless this is. It doesn't matter. Just listen. I told you what I saw, but I don't know everything. Forget I said anything, except the warning. I don't want your death on my conscience. Please, if you know what's good for you, remember, no one is looking out for you. And if you disappear, it'll be another name on the list of those I couldn't protect. She shoved me out of her car and drove off. I stood there reeling at what I had just heard. I had no idea what the hell to do about the insanity I was embroiled in. I returned home and didn't even try to go back to sleep. I had to think of something. There had to be some way of finding out for sure what was going on and how to stop it. Hours later, I was now closer to a solution. Yet the clock ticked ominously closer to the start of my shift. Reluctantly, I forced myself to leave, my mind reeling as I headed back to that monstrous warehouse of hidden nightmares. When I finally arrived for my shift, I hesitated. Fear and anxiety were choking me, compelling me to turn around and flee. I convinced myself that I would find out what was really going on tonight, one way or another. I would see what was going on, and if there was a way to stop it myself, then I would. I couldn't just wait, watch, and move those hideous boxes anymore. I went inside and saw no one else near my station. Jean's car had been in the parking lot and I knew she had to be there. I grabbed the shipping log and saw that a truck was already in the dock. I decided to try and play out the day like normal and see what I could find out. I figured it might be beneficial that I was alone for the time being. It might give me an opportunity. I got to the loading bay and I was still alone. The truck sat there, loaded with those ominous black boxes that had haunted my thoughts since I'd first seen them. Everything was eerily quiet. No Jean, no Matt, no one around. Just me and those boxes. As I approached the truck, a plan started to take shape in my mind. A part of me screamed to stick to the rules, unload the boxes, put them on ice, and walk away. It was the safe path, the one that ensured my survival. Yet, I hesitated. Jean's words echoed in my mind, as well as the thought of Lisa and her brother vanishing. I was torn, caught between the safety of protocol and the urgency of what I knew deep down needed to be done. I quickly inspected the ceiling, locating the security cameras. There was a blind spot near the back corner of the warehouse, where the loading dock met the cold storage area. If I could move one container there, my plan might work. I grabbed a dolly and approached the truck. My hands trembled as I maneuvered the closest container onto it. The digital display read -18 degrees Celsius, a proper temperature according to protocol. Whatever was inside would be fully dormant. The container felt impossibly heavy as I wheeled it slowly toward the camera blind spot, my eyes constantly darting around for any sign of movement. The corner was dimly lit, shrouded in shadows cast by tall shelving units. I positioned the container against the wall and stared at it, my breath coming in shallow gasps. This was it. The moment of truth. My fingers hovered over the container's edge, searching for any gaps. There had to be a way to open it without triggering an alarm. I examined the seams carefully, noticing a series of recessed latches along one side. The container's surface was unnervingly cold, frost forming around my fingertips where they touched the metal. I held my breath and released the first latch. It clicked open with surprising ease. The second followed, then the third. With each one, I expected sirens, shouts, Stanton's massive form appearing from the shadows. But there was only silence. The final latch gave way, and the lid rose slightly, a wisp of frigid vapor escaping into the air. I hesitated, Jean's warnings echoing in my mind. Once I looked inside, there would be no going back. Knowledge was dangerous at PT Shipping. I held my breath and lifted the lid. The stench hit me first, chemical and organic, like a hospital morgue. The container was filled almost to the brim with that same amber fluid I'd seen leaking before, only now it was almost frozen solid, like some grotesque amber-colored ice cube. And suspended within it, perfectly preserved, was what appeared to be a person. At least, it looked like a person. The face was intact, a man, maybe 40, his features frozen in an expression of terror. But below the neck, things became wrong. The right arm ended at the elbow, replaced by what looked like a hollow cast or shell for something else. The surface had been seamlessly fused to the flesh, with intricate patterns etched into the metal that seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. The chest had been partially hollowed out, filled with a network of tubes and mechanical components I couldn't begin to identify. Where the lower body should have been, a framework of metal and a lattice of what looked like porcelain and plaster extended downward, forming a grotesque approximation of human legs. I recoiled in horror, nearly dropping the lid. This was beyond anything I could have imagined. Not just transportation of bodies, but bodies that had been mutilated. I remember what Jean had said about how they shipped parts and how some of them were alive, and they put things together and sent them off in the red boxes. If this was a part, just what the hell would the final product be? As I stared in morbid fascination, the eyes suddenly snapped open. I stumbled backward, crashing into the shelving behind me. Blue eyes, unmistakably human, stared out from that frozen face. The amber fluid remained solid, yet somehow those eyes moved, tracking me as I scrambled away. The mouth of the person opened, but no sounds came out. It was like someone trying to scream underwater. The sight was horrible, and the lucidity in their eyes was nightmarish. They were aware of what was happening at that moment. I slammed the lid shut, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The latches clicked back into place one by one, each sounds like a gunshot in the silent warehouse. I backed away from the container, bile rising in my throat. That person was conscious, trapped in that frozen coffin while their body was being transported for God knows what horrible transformation. I staggered back, horrified and frozen in fear. My terrified stupor broke when I heard the intercom flare to life.
New guy, I hope you're finishing up with that truck in Bay B. We have a special shipment inbound in Bay C. Get over there as soon as you were done.
Matt's voice died down on the intercom, and I knew I had to move quickly. I wheeled the containers into cold storage, my mind still reeling from what I'd seen. The frigid air bit at my exposed skin as I navigated through the maze of shelving units, each one holding dozens of identical black boxes. How many people were trapped inside? How many were still conscious, aware of their fate? As I pushed deeper into the storage area, trying to find space for the final container, I noticed a section I hadn't seen before. A heavy chain-link partition separated it from the main storage area, with a sign that read, "Authorized security personnel only." Through the frosty air, I could make out rows of containers that looked slightly different from the others, their surfaces marred with the warning labels and red tags. I knew I shouldn't go closer. Every instinct screamed to turn around, to forget what I'd seen. But something pulled me forward, past the unlocked gate and into the restricted section. I looked for cameras and didn't see any in there, and moved further in. The temperature dropped even further here, cold enough that my breath formed crystals in the air. The first few containers were sealed tight, identical to the others except for their red tags. But the last one in the row was different. The lid was slightly ajar, as if someone had closed it in haste. And from the narrow gap, a human hand protruded, frozen in a desperate reaching gesture. I approached slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. The hand was feminine, with chipped black nail polish and around the wrist, a familiar dragon tattoo. My heart sank. I recognized that tattoo immediately. I grasped the edge of the container's lid and pulled it open wider. The hydraulic hinges resisted at first, then gave way with a soft hiss of escaping gas. More of that amber fluid glistened inside, partially crystallized but not completely frozen. And there she was, Lisa, the woman who had held me at gunpoint just hours ago, now suspended in the viscous amber. Her eyes were closed, her face peaceful in a way that seemed cruelly deceptive given the circumstances. Unlike the previous container I'd opened, her body appeared untouched. No mechanical additions or surgical alterations, yet. A label affixed to the inside of the lid caught my attention. Dissident. Processing pending. Priority Alpha. My stomach lurched as the full implications hit me. This wasn't just some evil operation shipping body parts. They were actively capturing people who caused trouble, who asked questions, who came looking for missing loved ones, and they were turning them into something horrible. As I stared down at Lisa's frozen form, her eyes suddenly snapped open just like the other one had. Recognition flickered in their depths, followed by naked terror. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, trapped within the semi-solid amber. She was alive. I needed to get her out. I reached for her, but the amber liquid had frozen enough where I could not just pull her out. As I searched for something to break it, I panicked when I heard Matt's annoyed voice by the cold storage entrance.
What's taking so long? We need to get back to Base C for a priority shipment. Is everything all right in here?
I stole a final glance at Lisa's pleading eyes and stepped away, unable to help without risking our lives. I had to leave her for now, to focus on the priority shipment. I exited the secure section, pretending to put away a black box when Matt noticed me.
There you are. We need to move quickly. Drop what you're doing and come on. You can finish it later.
I nodded my head and followed. Matt seemed oddly nervous, and it felt like there was something he was not telling me. I looked back at cold storage once and grimaced, then followed Matt to the loading bay where the priority shipment awaited. When I arrived, Matt was already waiting with Jean. Both of them were standing stiffly and focused on the truck at the platform. This truck was unlike any other. It was adorned with intricate details that set it apart. The trim gleamed more brightly against the deep black paint, catching the light and casting a sharp contrast. An unusually elaborate decal graced its side, a delicate pattern that resembled fine filigree, swirling elegantly and adding a touch of sophistication to the otherwise industrial vehicle.
You're late,
Matt muttered without turning his head.
Sorry. Just get in position,
he interrupted, pointing to a spot on the opposite side of the dock from Jean.
This is a special delivery. Category red.
I remembered the implications of the red containers and nearly froze. I had seen some on other trucks and wondered what was so special about this one. I glanced at Jean, whose face had gone completely expressionless, though I noticed her knuckles were white where she gripped her clipboard.
What do I need to... Stand there. Don't speak. Don't touch anything unless I tell you to.
Matt finished, his tone leaving no room for argument. The driver's door of the truck opened, and a figure stepped out. At first, I thought it was a man in an unusually formal suit, but as he approached, I realized this was no ordinary delivery driver. He stood well over 6 feet tall, gaunt to the point of emaciation, with pale skin stretched too tightly over sharp cheekbones. His movements were precise, almost mechanical, and his expensive-looking suit hung on his frame like it was tailored for someone with more flesh.
Mr. Jaspin,
Matt said, his voice suddenly formal.
We weren't expecting you personally tonight.
The tall man's lips curved into what might have been a smile. Circumstances required my presence, Matthew. His voice was cultured, smooth as silk, but with an underlying quality that made my skin crawl. This particular shipment is of exceptional importance. He turned his gaze on me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray that seemed to shift like mercury under the harsh, dark lights. And who might this be? He asked, examining me with the clinical detachment of a scientist studying a specimen.
"A new handler," Matt replied tersely. "Started this week."
"I see." Mr. Jaspin approached me, his footsteps making no sound at all. He extended a hand that looked too long, the fingers too thin. "Henry Jaspin, proprietor of the Proud Tailor." As I shook his hand, I noticed his skin was cool and dry, almost like touching fine-grained leather rather than human flesh. Instinctively, I told him my name, regretting it instantly when I saw Jean's eyes widen slightly in alarm. Something told me giving this man my real name was a mistake. "Pleasure to meet you, good sir. I do hope you'll be more durable than your predecessor." Before I could respond, Mr. Jaspin turned sharply and strode to the back of the truck. He produced a small silver key from his pocket and inserted it into what looked like a standard padlock. But when he turned it, the entire rear section of the truck seemed to shimmer. "Matthew, if you would assist me," he called, gesturing with one elongated finger. Matt immediately moved to help, leaving Jean and me standing awkwardly at the loading dock. The rear doors of the truck swung open silently, revealing a cargo area that seemed impossibly deep given the dimensions of the vehicle. Inside was a single container, larger than any I'd seen before. Unlike the black boxes we'd processed earlier, this one was a deep crimson color, with intricate gold filigree etched across its surface. It looked more like an antique chest than a shipping container, and unlike the others. Matt and Mr. Jaspin carefully maneuvered the container onto the loading dock. It moved with surprising lightness for its size, as if whatever was inside weighed almost nothing. Once it was off the truck, Matt leaned in and whispered something to Mr. Jaspin. He nodded his head and looked back at us. I felt Jean's elbow dig sharply into my ribs, snapping me back to awareness. I realized I'd been staring. I quickly composed myself and adopted what I hoped was a neutral expression, but it was too late. Mr. Jaspin had noticed. "Fascinating, isn't it?" he said, his voice like velvet wrapped around a blade. "One of my finest works in progress. Would you like a sneak peek?" I swallowed hard, unable to look away from the container. The strange buzzing sound was audible now, and it nearly overwhelmed me. "No, I shouldn't. We're not allowed to look in the boxes," I managed to say, my voice steadier than I expected. Mr. Jaspin's smile widened, revealing teeth that were too white, too perfect. "Indeed. I see you were trained well. But in this case we can make an exception. After all, Matthew might be in charge here, but I am in charge of Matthew. Oh, so please, indulge me." He laughed a harsh and brittle chuckle that made me wince, and Matt looked on, grinding his teeth while looking uncomfortable. Now, come. You will see that each piece is unique. Custom-tailored, you might say." He ran one long finger along the edge of the container. "This particular model requires special handling. It will reside in our secure storage until completion." Matt cleared his throat.
"I'll take it to the secure cold storage unit myself, sir."
"No," Mr. Jaspin said sharply, his eyes never leaving my face. "I believe our new hire should assist me. A learning opportunity. Wouldn't you agree?" I felt Jean tense behind me, though her expression remained neutral. Matt's face darkened with what might have been concern, but he nodded stiffly.
Of course, sir. However you prefer to handle this."
Mr. Jaspin gestured for me to take the other end of the cart. "Shall we? The night grows old, and we must away to the workshop." With no reasonable way to refuse, I moved to the cart and helped guide it as Mr. Jaspin led us deeper into the warehouse, toward the special storage area, and whatever terrible revelations lay in wait. As we approached the restricted area, I felt a growing sense of dread coiling in the pit of my stomach. The wheels of the cart squeaked slightly, the sound amplified in the otherwise silent warehouse. Mr. Jaspin moved with an unsettling grace, his gait fluid yet somehow mechanical, like a marionette operated by an expert puppeteer. "You must have questions," he said without turning around, his voice carrying easily despite its softness. "New employees always do." "No, sir. Just focused on doing my job correctly." A low chuckle escaped him, distressing in its lack of mirth. "Admirable discipline, but your eyes betray your curiosity." He stopped abruptly before the keypad-secured door. "The human mind abhors a mystery, doesn't it? Always seeking to categorize, to understand." He punched in a complex sequence on the keypad, his long fingers moving with practiced precision. The heavy door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, releasing a blast of frigid air that smelled faintly of formaldehyde and something else I couldn't identify. Something metallic and organic at the same time. "Off to you," Mr. Jaspin said, gesturing with an elegant sweep of his arm. I hesitated for just a moment before pushing the cart forward. The room beyond was bathed in a soft blue light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The temperature dropped dramatically as we entered, our breath immediately visible as small clouds in the air. Despite the cold, I felt beads of sweat forming on my forehead. The room was much larger than I'd expected, stretching back farther than the blue lighting allowed me to see clearly. Along both walls stood rows of containers, similar to the crimson one we were transporting, though these varied in size and coloration. Some were upright, like standing coffins, while others lay horizontal on raised platforms. Each had the same viewing panel, though mercifully, most were positioned so I couldn't see inside. There were also several rows of strange-looking clothes on small end tables and racks as well, something to finally indicate that clothes were being made somewhere at least. "Welcome to the gallery," Mr. Jaspin said, his voice taking on a reverent quality, "where art and function merge into something transcendent." In the center of the room stood a large stainless steel table that resembled an operating theater setup, complete with drains in the floor beneath it. Surrounding it were tools hanging on a rack, fine chisels, specialized saws, and instruments I couldn't identify that looked more medical than artistic. "Place it here," Mr. Jaspin instructed, pointing to an empty space along the right wall. As we maneuvered the container into position, I accidentally bumped against one of the others. A hollow thumping sound came from inside, followed by what I could only describe as a muffled whimper. I froze, my blood turning to ice. "Careful, please." Mr. Jaspin's voice remained pleasant, but something dangerous flickered in his mercury eyes. "These pieces are sensitive to disturbance." "Sorry," I mumbled, my heart hammering against my ribs. Once the container was positioned, Mr. Jaspin produced another key from his pocket, this one brass with an ornate handle. He inserted it into a lock on the crimson container, turning it with a soft click. The lid didn't open, but a small control panel illuminated along the side, displaying temperature and humidity readings. "Perfect," he murmured, adjusting something on the panel. "This particular piece requires precise environmental conditions. Too cold, and certain components become brittle. Too warm and, well, awareness can be problematic at this stage." Awareness. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I knew I shouldn't, but the question escaped my lips before I could restrain myself. "Mr. Jaspin," I began, cautious waring with horror in my mind. "What exactly is the Proud Tailor's business, specifically?" Mr. Jaspin turned to me, his head tilting at an angle that seemed just slightly wrong, like a bird studying potential prey. For a long moment, he simply observed me, his expression unreadable. Then his lips curved upward in that terrible approximation of a smile. "There is the question I've been waiting for. I know at this point you are aware that our craft has to do with the human form. To put it simply, we create perfection. Humanity is flawed, fragile, temporary, and inconsistent. We improve upon nature's design. We sculpt, refine, and transform. We weave the threads of life and death, the mundane and the extraordinary, into constructs of breathtaking form and function. Not just with simple cloth, but with flesh itself, tailoring in its truest, most exalted sense." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "Transform?" He sighed, running his fingers lovingly across the container's surface. "We prefer to think of it as elevation. The raw material becomes something greater, more permanent. Would you like a demonstration?" Before I could decline, he pressed the other button on the box, and the front slid open, revealing the awful contents. Inside was something horrible. It appeared to be some sort of mutilated human form, yet the thing was designed to look like a doll or mannequin. It had the general shape of a human figure, but parts of it seemed to be made of a strange, polished material. Other parts looked like actual flesh. Its face was partially formed, with one perfectly sculpted eye and mouth, while the other remained blank, waiting to be completed. I could have sworn the completed eye stared straight at me. As I looked at the monstrous eye, the buzzing sound intensified and my head was pounding, and I felt like I might double over. "This one, of course, is incomplete. It will still need to be verified at system maintenance once it is ready. That is when we test all of them before shipping them out. We need to make sure they are functional, though they are quite obedient to their owners for the most part. They have a bad tendency to maim and kill anyone in the area who does not know how to control them. So many accidents in this very warehouse. Each one could have been avoided if people were just a bit more cautious. If they just followed instructions." He sighed languidly and shrugged his long shoulders. I was frozen in place. I had no idea why Mr. Jaspin was showing me this. He was saying that these things were what they were building with human parts and that they could move. I didn't know how he could think it was not a liability to show me the truth of the shipping operation. As if reading my mind, he spoke. "Now, my friend, I am afraid you have seen everything you were going to see today." I hesitated and was about to turn and try to leave, Thank you, Mr. Jaspin. I swear I won't. I began, backing away slightly, desperate to convince him of my silence. His smile widened unnaturally. Oh, you must be mistaken, my friend. You won't be leaving. Matthew informed me you've been curious, opening one of our special containers in cold storage. His voice remained conversational, almost friendly. Such initiative deserves recognition. My stomach dropped. Matt had seen me. The cameras I thought were in blind spots weren't blind at all. It was a mistake. I didn't see. Oh, but you did. As I said, your eyes betray your curiosity. Indeed, you have been curious. I wanted to reward that curiosity. I wanted you to have answers. Some context. You deserve to know that much at least. You deserve to know what your sacrifice is for, and what you will help build in making it. Now you'll contribute to our work in a more intimate capacity. My heart sank as I listened to Mr. Jaspin. He was not going to let me leave. Before I could react, the mannequin in the container suddenly jerked to life. Its movements were stiff yet impossibly fast as it lurched forward. Something glinted in its partially formed hand, a syringe filled with amber liquid. I tried to scramble backward, but my feet seemed rooted to the floor. The thing's arm shot out with mechanical precision. I felt a sharp pain as the needle plunged into my neck. The amber fluid burned as it entered my bloodstream, spreading like liquid fire through my veins. Perfect. Mr. Jaspin's voice seemed to come from far away, as darkness crept into the edges of my vision. The first step to becoming something better. My legs gave way beneath me. As consciousness slipped away, I caught a final glimpse of the mannequin's half-completed face, smiling down at me in frozen horror. I drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of movement and cold. So cold. My body felt impossibly heavy, as if gravity had doubled its pull on me alone. Through half-lidded eyes, I caught glimpses of harsh fluorescent lights passing overhead as I was wheeled somewhere on a gurney. Voices filtered through the haze of the sedative, distorted and dreamlike. Place it with the rest. Better to keep it on ice until then. Maintenance soon. After that, we can get started. Yes, sir. I will take him there now. The amber fluid burned through my veins, paralyzing my muscles while leaving my mind horrifyingly alert. I understood now why the eyes of those trapped in the containers could move, while their bodies remained frozen. We were conscious prisoners in our own flesh. The gurney finally stopped moving. Through my drug-induced fog, I recognized the sterile white walls and frigid air of the cold storage area. The same place where I'd found Lisa. The realization that I would soon join her, suspended in that amber prison, while I awaited my transformation into one of those mannequin things, sent me into a terrified spiral. I tried to scream, to thrash, to give any indication that I was still conscious. But my body refused to respond. I saw a vacant black box out of the corner of my eye, and knew I would be trapped in this nightmare forever. I was about to just let go and close my eyes and await the nightmarish fate that was in store for me, when suddenly a pair of gloved hands lifted me from the gurney. I was dimly aware of some sensation in my neck. I thought someone may have stuck me with another needle. I felt a hot wave rush through my body, and I felt an agonized sensation, burning pain coursing through my limbs. It hurt like hell, but at least I could feel them again. More importantly, I could feel them slowly responding to the impulse to move. I heard a voice call out to me. Get up. Now. It was Jean, her face materializing above me as my vision cleared. Her usually impassive features were contorted with urgency. I've given you adrenaline and a neural stimulant. You'll be able to move in about 30 seconds, but it won't last long. I tried to speak, but managed only a gurgling sound. Jean glanced nervously at the door. We have 4 minutes before the 5 a.m. alarm. She yanked at my arm, helping me into a sitting position. If we're still here when that happens, we're dead. My limbs felt like they were made of lead, but sensation was returning in waves of pins and needles. How? I croaked. No time. Jean snapped, pulling me to my feet. I stumbled, nearly falling, but she caught me with surprising strength. I told you, I didn't want another death on my conscience. My brain was starting to clear as the stimulant took effect. I took an experimental step, then another, each one steadier than the last. Lisa, I managed to say. She's in one of these. We can't leave her. Jean's expression hardened. She's already in suspension. We can't help her now, not without equipment we don't have. We have to go now. Desperation surged through me as I glanced at the rows of containers. We can't just leave her. We don't have a choice, Jean hissed, dragging me toward the exit. 2 minutes until maintenance. Do you understand what that means? My legs wobbled beneath me as I stumbled forward, a reality of our situation crystallizing through the chemical fog in my brain. Jean was right. We couldn't save Lisa now, not without becoming prisoners ourselves. The best I could do was survive to find help. We reached the main floor just as the warning lights began to flash. The cameras? I managed to ask as we hurried across the warehouse floor. Loop feed for the next 90 seconds, she replied tersely. The distant wail of the maintenance alarm began to sound as we ran. We were almost at the nearest exit when a deafening crash echoed through the warehouse. I spun around to see a tower of stacked crates collapsing toward us like a timber avalanche. Jean shoved me hard, sending me sprawling as wooden boxes rained down where I had been. I was not crushed, but now there was a wall of freight between us and the emergency exit. Find another way out, Jean shouted, her voice barely audible over the wailing alarm. I scrambled to my feet, disoriented. The maintenance alarm reached its crescendo, the lights dimming to an eerie red glow that cast everything in blood-tinged shadows. We were too late. A mechanical grinding sound reverberated through the building as multiple doors began to open simultaneously. All the staging area doors where the red cargo boxes were taken had opened up. From the darkness beyond, something was moving. Not one thing, but dozens of them. They moved with jerky, unnatural precision, some still bearing the horrifying half-human faces I'd seen earlier. Others were more complete, polished, and perfect in their uncanny resemblance to people, save for the blank emptiness in their eyes. Some wore an array of strange clothes, which made a grim sort of sense despite the imminent danger. Their limbs clicked in word as they filed into the warehouse floor, fanning out with methodical efficiency. The buzzing noise they generated was intolerable. I clutched my head in pain and saw Jean grit her teeth and try to ignore the maddening din. The mannequins moved in unison, with a terrible purpose, their unblinking eyes scanning methodically. They seemed to be moving randomly at first. Some even bent down and moved parts of their bodies like a person stretching. We thought we might be safe at first, but one spotted us and raised a rigid arm in our direction. The others immediately turned, their movements synchronizing with horrifying precision as they charged in unison at us. "Run!" Jean screamed, grabbing my arm and yanking me toward the loading docks. My legs felt leaden, the stimulant already beginning to fade, but terror gave me renewed strength as we sprinted across the warehouse floor. Behind us, the mannequins gave chase, their footsteps a nightmarish staccato against the concrete. They didn't run so much as glide, their movements unnaturally smooth despite their mechanical nature. The buzzing intensified, vibrating through my skull until I thought my head would split open. Jean slammed into the loading dock doors, frantically punching a code into the keypad. "Come on, come on," she muttered, glancing over her shoulder. The nearest mannequin was less than 20 yards away, its partially formed face frozen in a grotesque smile. The keypad flashed red. "Damn it!" Jean pounded the panel with her fist. "They're locked down." I spun around, searching desperately for another escape route. The office area was too far, and the emergency exits would be sealed during maintenance. They didn't intend for anyone here during maintenance to have a way out. My eyes fell on the loading bay. Maybe we could get out that way. Jean caught on immediately and pivoted, racing alongside me. The mannequins were gaining ground with each passing second, their movements becoming more fluid as they closed in. The buzzing in my head was almost unbearable now, like thousands of insects boring into my brain. We raced on, the clattering nightmare procession of mannequins close behind us. I heard Jean scream as one grabbed her leg, and she fell hard. She cried out, "Just keep going!" I stopped and looked in panic. I had to do something to help her. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the intercom system panel nearby where she was struggling, and remembered something odd from the rules. I had no idea if it would work, but it was our only hope at that point. I reached out and pressed the button and hoped that this was the sensitive equipment that could be affected by it. Almost immediately, the buzzing distortion of the swarm of mannequins created a terrible feedback loop in the intercom that caused them to start convulsing and twitching uncontrollably. The one who had Jean let go, and I helped her back to her feet and we ran on towards the loading bay. We reached the bay and there was still a truck waiting to be unloaded. Jean yanked open the passenger door and shoved me inside before scrambling around to the driver's side. "Do you know how to drive this thing?" I gasped, my vision swimming as the sedative fought against the adrenaline in my system. Jean slid into the seat, her hands already moving across the dashboard. 7 years, she muttered. "You learn things." Her fingers found a hidden panel beneath the steering column, revealing a keypad similar to the ones throughout the warehouse. She punched in a sequence, and the engine roared to life. Behind us, the mannequins had reached the truck, their blank faces pressed against the windows, hollow eyes staring with hunger. One began pounding on the driver's side window, the impact creating spider web cracks across the glass. "Hold on!" Jean shouted, throwing the truck into reverse. The massive vehicle lurched backward, crushing several mannequins beneath its wheels. The sickening sound of breaking plaster and something far too organic mingled with the engine's roar. The truck smashed through the loading bay doors, tearing them off almost completely. Nearby, there were panicked cries from the assembled workers who had been waiting outside for the maintenance to be over. Jean and I watched on in horror as the crowd was set upon by the murderous mannequins. They ripped and tore through our unknown colleagues. Jean glanced back once, pain and guilt racking her. She had saved me, but those others had been slain by our escape effort. She drove on, taking us out of there and trying to ignore the horror of what we left behind. The truck smashed through the fence surrounding the facility, its tires screeching as Jean pushed it to its limits. We sped down the empty highway, the lights of PT shipping receding in the rearview mirror. Neither of us spoke for miles, the horror of what we'd witnessed too fresh, too overwhelming. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. Jean's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Away, as far as possible." She glanced at me, her usual stoicism cracked by fear. "We need to separate. It's safer that way." "What about Lisa? All those people?" "We can't help them," she said flatly, though I caught the slight tremor in her voice. "Not now. Maybe not ever." By dawn, we'd crossed the state line. Jean pulled into an abandoned gas station, the truck's engine ticking as it cooled. "This is where we part ways," she said, reaching into her pocket. She handed me a thick envelope. "Emergency cash, since you never got your paycheck." "Jean, I can't." "Take it," she insisted. "I've been planning my exit for years. Just never had the courage until now." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Guess you gave me that. I couldn't just ignore this shit forever." "What'll you do?" I asked. She shrugged. "Disappear. Maybe find evidence. Maybe just survive." She opened her door. "Don't contact me. At least for a good while. Don't look for me. Don't trust anyone." I nodded my head, and before she left, I told her, "Jean, thank you for everything." She looked back at me with a hint of a genuine smile. "Don't waste it. Stay safe, and maybe I'll see you again. Someday." I watched her walk away, a silhouette against the rising sun. In minutes, she had disappeared into the tree line, leaving me alone with a stolen truck and a head full of nightmares. I abandoned the vehicle a mile later, wiping down everything I'd touched. The envelope she gave me contained $3,000 in cash. For the last 2 weeks, I've been laying low. I can't go home. I have no idea how far the reach of PT is. I'm holed up in a motel, a run-down establishment where the desk clerk takes cash without questions, and the cleaning staff never knock. The peeling wallpaper and musty carpet have become my sanctuary, my prison. At least for now. I spend my days poring over newspapers, searching for any mention of PT shipping, of missing people, of anything that might help me understand what I'd witnessed. And at night, I dream of people trapped in coffin-like boxes and mannequin monsters with human eyes. I considered calling Jean, but she insisted I don't, at least for now. I just hope she's okay, wherever she is. I thought I might be safe for a time, but last night dispelled the illusion that I will ever be safe again. The knock on my door came at 3:17 a.m. 3 sharp raps that jolted me from restless sleep. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs. Nothing at that hour could be good. Another knock came, more insistent. I slid silently from the bed, grabbing the knife I bought from a store 2 days ago. The peephole showed only darkness. Someone had covered it from the outside. "Package delivery," a voice called, mechanical and flat. I backed away from the door, knife clutched in trembling fingers. There's a soft thud as something hits the carpet outside my room, followed by receding footsteps. I waited for a while before daring to crack open the door. The parking lot was empty. No one was around. Yet there, on the welcome mat, was a small brown package wrapped in plain paper. My name was handwritten across the front in an elegant script that seemed oddly familiar. I retrieved it quickly and locked the door behind me, sliding the chain into place, though I know it would offer little protection against the kind of threat I feared. The package was lightweight, no more than a pound, and made no sound when I shook it. For a long moment, I simply stared at it, debating whether to open it or burn it. Curiosity won. It always did. I tore away the brown paper, and inside was a white box, the kind used for clothing gifts. I held my breath as I lifted the lid, already suspecting some horror to be there. The stench hit me first. Chemical preservatives barely masking the sickly sweet smell of decay. Folded neatly inside, like some grotesque piece of fabric, was a section of human skin. I stumbled backward, knocking over the bedside lamp as bile rose in my throat. It took several moments before I could force myself to look again. The skin had been carefully preserved, the edges trimmed with a surgical precision. A tattoo clearly visible on the torn piece of skin. A dragon, intricately detailed, its colors still vibrant against the pallid flesh. My legs gave way and I collapsed to the floor, a silent scream building in my chest. They had killed her, or worse, turned her into one of those things. Then I saw a small note in the package, next to the flayed skin. As I read the note, my hands trembled, and I realized I can't get away. I read the elegant script of the carefully folded note. My dear friend, the proud tailor always keeps an eye on its property. Miss Lisa has contributed magnificently to our latest creation. Perhaps you will be reunited soon. We haven't forgotten you. Yours in anticipation, H.J. I dropped the note, scrambling away until my back hit the wall. They knew where I was. They'd been watching me this entire time. The realization crashed over me. I'd never escaped at all. With trembling hands, I gathered the horrific contents of the box and shoved them into the bathroom trash can. I couldn't bring myself to touch the skin again. That piece of Lisa had proved her fate. I poured a bottle of cheap whiskey over everything and set it ablaze, watching as the flames consumed the evidence of P.T.'s reach. The smoke alarm began to wail, but I ignored it, fixated on making sure every scrap burned to ash. Only when the flames threatened to spread did I douse them with water from the shower. The room reeked of smoke, whiskey, and something else. The lingering chemical smell that would forever remind me of those containers. I have to do something. They can't get away with this. But what can I do? They will never let me go. They will never stop trying to reclaim their inventory.